Welcome to the GCN Tech Clinic, where we aim to answer your bike and tech-related questions. As ever, you can submit your questions down below in the comments section using the hashtag AskGCNTech, and we'll do our best to answer as many of them as possible. So first up, this week's question. The first one comes from Sam Redwood, who says, "Hi Ollie and Alex, I'm looking to upgrade to some deeper carbon wheels and can't decide between different spoke options. Stainless steel spokes or carbon spokes. It's a big price difference between the two, so what are the pros and cons? I do about 100 kilometers a week and I'm thinking of getting into bike packing. Any advice? Much appreciated." Well, the big pros and cons, as you've mentioned, is the price. Carbon spokes considerably more expensive. The big difference is going to be the weight. Carbon spokes are going to be, slightly lighter, but you're only talking typically in the region of sort of 50 to 100 grams. That weight difference really is quite tiny, especially once the wheel is up to speed. And even if you calculated the difference that weight would make on a long climb, like something like Alpe d'Huez, it's only going to be marginal. You're talking probably like a second in your overall total time on the climb. That said, only you can decide if the extra outlay is worth it, but steel spokes and alloy spokes, the build that they can be very stiff wheels. You look at what DT Swiss is doing, they make incredible alloy spokes that are very narrow now and super aerodynamic that are used in a lot of wheels. So it's not really sort of carbon's better than steel. It doesn't really happen. It's just the weight is a bit less. So that's the main thing to consider if that's something that's important to you. Next question is from Kevin Dior, who says, "Greetings from Indonesia. What do you guys think are the most important things to keep an eye on when purchasing a second-hand bike?" Well, we've done a video on this, so make sure you check that out because there's a lot of useful information in there. But I would say you want to sort of engage Sherlock Holmes mode whenever you buy a used bike and really pay attention to sort of all the key classic areas of wear. So things like look at the bearings, look at the drivetrain, because you want to know what you're getting and what it's going to cost you in the immediate future. So a bike might seem like an absolute bargain, but if the cassette and the chain are completely worn, you're going to have to replace them pretty soon. That's not necessarily a bad thing because you can replace them, but just be aware of what something is actually worth. So it's going to be worth less if you need to replace the chain and the cassette. And you can use that to haggle and get money off the overall list price of the bike. But I think used bikes are amazing. There's so many great bargains out there, and just, educate yourself as to what are the signs of damage and potential things to look for. But yeah, it's an absolute bargain market out there. A lot of people buy bikes, hardly use them, and then sell them in their incredible condition. So persevere, look for the bargains. Next question is from Yaha Bali, who says he recently got a gravel bike, Candale Topstone. Good choice, cool bikes those. And it comes with 2x Shimano GRX 800. And the chain ring that's fitted, the chain set that's fitted to it is a 4630. He's asking, can I install a 5230 as I have a spare 52 chain ring from an old road bike, but he's not sure if it will work. Would a chain catcher solve my issue? Thanks for your answer. Right, so you can mix and match Shimano chain rings. In the past, I've run a 53 chain ring with a 34 in a ring, and I've known other people have tried this out. It does work, but you are compromising the shifting of the front mech, and your chances of dropping the chain when you shift the front mech are greatly increased. This is because Shimano system isn't designed to cope with that big gap, that big jump in teeth from a small wing to a bigger ring. And in your case, it's not designed for that. Shimano would absolutely never recommend it. Because Shimano stuff works so well, it can still work. It's just not going to work optimally, and you are risking dropping your chain. So what you're proposing would be, I think, like a 22 tooth difference between the chain rings, and the system just can't handle that. So your options going forwards are, if you want bigger chain rings, go for a 50-34, or you go for a 52-36, or even a 53-39 if you really want to go for a standard chain set. But yeah, that's the solution. Next question is from 03 and Kid, who says, "Hi, Alex, Manon and Ollie. I've recently completed two 200-kilometre rides and found that my Garmin Edge computer is always short by about 5 or 8 kilometres than all of my friends. All 4 of them have done more kilometres than me. I'm pairing my bike computer to an Ant Plus Giant Ride Sense cadence and speed sensor, and he's putting in the wheel diameter. You know, what do you think's going wrong here? The batteries are new. Should I be adjusting the wheel diameter to compensate for the sensor?" I would say, well, what you should do is just do a ride where you just run on the GPS and you don't use the speed and cadence sensor, and then see what the distance comes out as. Because I'm willing to bet that your friends are all running just GPS to calculate distance, and that's the most common way to do it. It should be fine to do it that way. If you want really, really accurate speed data, then a speed sensor is better. If you're doing aerodynamic testing, for example, we always use speed sensors when we're doing that because it's a much more accurate way of doing it, especially when you're sort of riding around a velodrome as well. But it's not essential in other applications. The other thing is that you can get your computer often to auto-calculate your wheel diameter, and this is probably a better way of doing it. Or if you are going to input your wheel diameter manually, actually measure it and do a rollout. So you mark your tyre, you mark on the floor where the tyre is touching, and then you wheel your bike in a straight line, and then till that part of the tyre is on the floor again at the bottom position, and then mark and then measure that distance, and that'll give you an accurate wheel diameter. The reason why it's better to do that is because different tyres on different rims, different width tyres, they create a slightly different diameter on your wheel. So you might have miscalculated that. So there's some things to try for you. Next question is from Alex Bond. Would a new Ultegra crankset work with an old 11-speed mechanical Ultegra group set? So if you're referring to the new 12-speed Ultegra, then I'd imagine that it probably will work to some degree, as the technology is sort of roughly the same, but it's not going to be optimal, and I personally wouldn't recommend you try it. It might work in a bodge sense, but the new chain sets are designed for a narrow gauge chain. They're designed for 12-speed. So it's really not advised, and I wouldn't suggest you do it. Next question is from Prithvi Hedge, who says, bit of a long one here, bear with me. I'm getting a new bike, and I'm considering buying either 105, group set of the people, or buying a used bike with Dura Ace and Ultegra on it. Now, so basically what you're asking is, do you buy a lower spec new bike or a higher spec used bike? I would say both are great options, and it would basically depend on what you can get your hands on. I'd say be in the market for both, shop around. If you can find a brilliant used bike, as we've mentioned on that previous question, there are loads of really good ones out there, and you can really drop on to a bike that's, well, had hardly any use. Sometimes, sadly, people buy bikes with the best intention in the world of using them and enjoying them, but they just sit in a shed, don't get used. If you can find one though, brilliant, get one of those. Yeah, I would personally be on the lookout for a used bike because I know what to look for. If you want to know what to look for, watch the video that I did, and you'll find out. Brecht D says, hi presenters, I recently bought a new bike and I'm riding on 28mm tyres. I previously used 23. I ride on well-maintained roads, but there are a few bumps along the way and I weigh about 60 kilograms. Can you give me an indication of what tyre pressure is most optimal to ride on? I previously had around 95 to 100 PSI in my tyres. Well, that sounds about right for your 23s, but I'd suggest you ride much lower on your 28s. Now, there is a really useful thing that you can go on the Zip website, and they have a calculator, a pressure calculator on there where you can look at your weight. And Pirelli also does it as well. They have a really useful chart that tells you what pressure you should run relative to your weight and also the width of the tyre that you're using. And I would say best thing to do is just consult these charts because they allow you to tweak the tyre pressure depending on other things as well, such as the type of road you're going to be riding on, or if it's wet or if it's dry, things like that, because you can tweak it in those conditions. But roughly around 65 psi, I'd say, just going off that, but have a look at the charts. Now, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for this week, so if I haven't answered your question, I'm sorry, but please keep submitting them and we'll do our best to get around to it eventually. And I'm going to head off now, but see you all later. Bye.